Hello, my friends. Today I just want to speak about what the world actually is and how you can break it down, and how once you see this, you can't unsee it. Everything will make sense to you. And also why anytime you're trying to tackle an issue that is very complicated and complex, has many working pieces to it, any issue whatsoever, you have to go back to the very basics of understanding something, know firmly the basics of that issue to be able to then see further into it in order to fix whatever the problem is. And this goes with anything in life. But the problem that we have in life specifically as a whole, as a fallen state, is that there's no way to escape the problem. We can't do anything to fix it. We can do nothing to even benefit the situation, as if something is benefited, it's just going to take from something else in order to gain the benefit. So there's no way around that. Some people are going to be winners at life, you would call them, and some people are going to be losers at life, so you would call them. Some people are going to be rich, some people are going to be poor. There's a right side and there's a left side to everything in life. But the left and the right side both operate under the same system. So this is what I'm going to kind of speak about. So if you break down the world and all of its working components down to three different types of people only. You break them down to sheep, you break them down to goats, you break them down to wolves. And from those three categories, I can show you the entire world, as those three categories themselves can then be broken down. Remember the centurion conversation that Jesus had with the soldier who asked to heal his child. I get order from this, I get an order from that one, I give an order to this one who gives an order to that one. That is Jesus explaining to you through that centurion how the world works. The wolves, they are at the top of the food chain. They are the predators. They surround the goats and the sheep. And you can picture the sheep, picture it like a constantly walking circle of sheep. And this is why this came out in the world not that long ago, where they were talking about the sheep that just walked in a circle for 13 days straight. Everything spiritually, you can see it physically, but you got to be paying attention. You have to have the spiritual eyes to see what something represents. God will give you everything spiritually in some physical form. That's why those sheep walking in a circle made the news. That's why many people heard about it and thought, oh, that was weird. But they don't question it any further than that, because they themselves are sheep and don't know that they're walking in the circle. But you have the sheep, who are basically the peoples who hold up all of society. They're the ones who are the workers in the fields. They are the ones who build your buildings. They're the ones who clean out the sewers. They're the ones who are putting fires out. They're your everyday working class people. You can look at them like sheep. There are goats and there are wolves that also fall into this category, but I'm talking about as a broad range. You can look at the people who are actually doing the majority of the work in the world. They are mostly the sheep. And the sheep can be broken down into two different peoples: the lost sheep and the sheep who are found. And again, we can break this down by the parable Jesus spoke. If you're a lost sheep, you're walking around in that circle every single day, constantly walking in that circle. And you don't even realize why. You don't question anything. You just keep walking in that circle because you've been ordered and directed since birth to walk in that circle. There's no thing that you know in life but that circle. Anything aside from that circle is terrifying to you, because your entire life since you were born, you were walking in that circle. That is somebody who has not been born again, somebody who does not know the Lord. They don't question anything. There's no intellect or no knowledge there to where they can see anything but that circle in their own lives. That is a lost sheep. people can call them non-playable characters, NPCs. Have you ever heard that term? That's another term for a lost sheep. Just keep going and going and going and going, constantly taking orders and never question anything that happens, because where they're walking, they believe themselves to be safe. It's all about safety to the sheep. The sheep don't want to be confrontational. They want to remain safe, and they think to themselves, well, as long as I just keep walking, I'll be safe. No harm will come against me, until eventually someday they'll be devoured. But the lost sheep continue walking. Now, there is another kind of sheep, a sheep that has been found. This is a sheep who has been born again. They know the Lord, and they know the truth, and they know the reality of their own situation in life. It all begins with a question. Why am I walking? Why is this happening? Why is that happening? And then from that question comes many different things. The sheep who are walking, who know the Lord, that means that they know who the Good Shepherd is. They're no longer following wolves' directions. They're no longer getting directions from the goats who receive the orders from the sheep. They are following the Good Shepherd, who is not of this world, just as they are no longer of the world. They are born again into something else. They have understanding that their physical body and everything physical in this world is but a front for something spiritual. And the example I like to use is of the mafia. Back in the 70s especially, there were many small businesses owned by members of the mob. They would own a laundromat, they would own a restaurant, they would own these things. And yeah, you could go to the laundromat and wash your clothes. You could go to the restaurant and order something to eat. But all of those businesses were a front for all of the illegal activity that they were doing. They used them, in most cases, as money laundering fronts. Well, the flesh is the same thing. It is a front for things happening in the spiritual terms that we can't see until we see it. So, I can pick up a baseball and I can throw it. I can pinch my arm and I feel the pain. But this whole experience that I'm observing, it's only secondary to what's happening in the spirit, even though to my experience, it seems like it's primary. You could consider it something like an avatar. So you have the sheep who are found, who know the Good Shepherd, and are led to greener pastures by him, meaning they will reject the rest of the world. But this doesn't mean that those sheep become unprofitable or against the law or outcasts within society. God did not put us into the world to be separate from the world in that way. He says, I will put you amongst them, and you will raise a family, you will get married, you will have a house, you will do the things that they do, but you will not become like them. In other words, what I do with my physical life, it's separate than the job that I'm given as my spiritual job. They're two completely different things. Though you live amongst them, you are not of them. Jesus, when he prayed for the disciples, he didn't pray for the disciples to be taken out of the world. He prayed for them to endure it while they were in it. It's, in other words, I live a very mundane life. I go and do one thing to the next every single day, the same as I always do. And I live for the Lord's return. I don't live for my future or trying to get rich or anything. I literally live for the return of God, because this world that I'm living in, I recognize it's unsustainable and it's evil. It's twisted. But something better is coming. It's like saying, if you just wait for Christmas, your present that you've always wanted is going to be under that tree. Well, come December 22nd, I find myself waiting for December 25th. And that's exactly what it is to live amongst the world. He didn't tell you to separate from people, as in go away from them and create your own cults out in the wilderness. What works would be done for God? Who is he saving? If you go out in the middle of the wilderness and speak to no one or do nothing your entire life, he can't save anybody through you. Your works are useless. Maybe not for yourself, but they are for the kingdom of heaven. Who can he recruit if you are not out amongst the field working with the rest who labor? So the sheep, this is pretty much them summed up in a nutshell. two different types, one who is aware of who they are and one who isn't. Now you go to the goats, and the reason why I have the Animal Farm up on my screen here as a picture, George Orwell was another prophet who nobody would say is a prophet, because very specifically what he spoke about is he saw communism. That is what you see today. Animal Farm is the kingdom of heaven on earth, run by all the fronts of God and Satan. We live in something like the Animal Farm, and it's not even disputable. If you've read the book, I'm sure pretty much everybody has. Most of the time whenever I was growing up, I first read it in school. That was a book that we read. Essentially, it speaks of how different animal groups will eventually start with a good idea, but it turns into communism by the end of it. It turns into destruction. It turns into the elevation of an elite group who will then try to take power for themselves and rule the world, such as the kingdom of heaven has been subject to since the beginning, since the fall. So the goats, they find themselves in a position where their safety in their mind comes from going together and taking the orders from the wolves who are above them. They believe that as long as they work for the wolves, they will be protected themselves, and they do not have God at all in them. There is not a single goat who has a conscience of the Holy Spirit. It is not present within the goats. The goats have their conscience seared, as is biblically written. What they do, they cannot feel. As a sheep, whether they are lost or whether they are found, a sheep can feel. They have remorse. The Spirit is naturally in them. They are looking for safe pastures. They're just deceived on where it's at. But a goat is intentionally one who misleads, who kills, who steals, who destroys, who tries to take things by power and force, just like the wolves, because they have a seared conscience. They have grieved the Holy Spirit. It cannot dwell within them because nothing but evil dwells within them. It takes a literal miracle of God to touch one who is a goat. And God will only touch a goat if it is for a specific purpose. Hence Paul. Paul, you could liken to a goat. He received his orders from the wolves, who he then persecuted and destroyed the church. And yet, Jesus came and saved him, or we wouldn't have half of the New Testament. It had to be somebody who was a goat, who came from within that Pharisaical sect of Judaism. Had to be someone amongst them who God chose himself to call out of it. God can restore anything. We can't. We have choices. And Paul also had a choice. When God appeared to him, he did not have to accept it. Just as when God appeared to Mary, Mary did not have to accept the plea of the angel. But they both did. So it is something specifically that was within Mary that was within Paul. And I'm not saying Mary was a goat. Mary was definitely a sheep. But Paul was definitely a goat. There was something specifically in him, in his heart, that was of God's own, and that he saved because of that. Those are things we will never understand why. It is like the sand trying to understand how it turned into a castle. It can't. Those are things specifically to God that don't even involve us. All we know is the after effect of that. So the goats, their safety comes in following the orders of the wolves, and the goats are well aware of the orders of the goats, or the wolves. The goats know that the wolves are evil. They know their plans are to destroy the sheep, and the goats do not care because that is their safety. If you go to a movie like The Stand, for instance, a Stephen King book turned into a movie, the group of criminals that follows around Flag and worships him and protects him and works for him, they are goats. Look at the media today. The media are goats. They are given their orders directly by the wolves, who then they regurgitate it to the sheep. If you can pull up many of these videos on YouTube where you will go to this news broadcast, this news broadcast, this news person, that news person, totally different companies, totally different broadcasts. even down to the independent YouTubers now, so to say independent, and you will literally hear them start off with the same exact thing. It means they're getting their orders from somewhere else. They don't just randomly come up with their talking point. It's given to them. It's given to them by a wolf, who the goats are then used as the fronts for the wolves. And the sheep will hate the goats, which we see that. All the sheep hate the goats because the sheep are aware that the goats are destroying them. But the sheep themselves, the lost ones, their conscience is seared to a degree. They walk in blindness because the fullness of the Gentiles has not yet come to that fullness. So there is a certain blindness over all of them, that they still will trust the goat, even innately knowing that the goat is evil and doing wrong and giving wrong direction to them. If you want to talk about the right-left paradigm that I've spoken of many a times, you have to understand that on the right is the same group of people that's on the left. The right are generally lawful, the left are not. Why does Jesus cut off the left but keep the right hand? Because the left hand is done. They are lawless. They are walking in a spirit that is against God. They are antichrist, and that's their choice. They choose to be ignorant. They choose to be blind, and those sheep on the left choose to serve the goats, and they choose to do it willingly for the goats' protection, knowing innately deep down inside of them that what the goats are doing is evil. They are willfully blind, as the Lord so called them. If I were to start attacking somebody on the left, as obviously I am on to the right, you can listen to everything that I speak about the things in the world, about politics and all kinds of different issues. In the world, you would call me on the right. Somebody that is not spiritual and doesn't understand, they have a conversation with me, they would call me far right, because they don't understand what I actually am. They don't understand the right and left is actually the same thing. It's in order to keep the law from completely crumbling down. You will have the right build up a faction, the left build up a faction, and they swing back and forth like a pendulum that the sheep all ride on. And that pendulum is being pushed and pulled by the goats and the wolves. This is the situation that we live in. If I come out against somebody who is blind on the left, and I speak of them, I can tell them they're evil. I will tell them that they are evil, and the things that they are doing is evil, and the things that they are doing is wrong, and they're doing it intentionally because they hate God. I can and will tell them that, but they will not hear that. But that's as far as I can go. I cannot hate them for that. If I hate them for it, then the blood is on my hands. God will take the hatred out of your heart. For instance, for the people on the left, is you cannot hate a blind man who runs into you on the street. He is blind. If I hate somebody on the left, if I hate one of them on the left, or I hate one of them on the right, it is no different than me as a person chewing both of my arms off and eating them. It is not profitable at all. And in the last video that I made when I spoke about what Kanye was saying, he was praising Hitler, saying Hitler did good things, which, according to the world, Hitler did do good things. But we can't talk about that. But if you look at Operation Paperclip, which happened after World War II, we brought tens of thousands of Germans over to America who then began to run all sorts of different things, high-ranking medicine and government bodies and the rocketry and the military programs. The Germans were far superior to everybody at the beginning of World War II, and they kept that superiority because they chased after it. They were occultist. They wanted something better than what mankind knows, so they seeked after it, and they kept seeking after it both in Russia and in America. So one should be able to say that in the world the Germans did this good and they did this evil. But one who is stuck on the pendulum as a sheep swinging back and forth, they cannot see that right and the left is one and the same thing. And that if they hate the left, they've also hated the right, and they've hated themselves, and they've sinned against their brothers because of the hatred in their own heart. They cannot understand this concept because they are lost sheep. So you have the goats who receive the orders from the wolves. They give the orders to the sheep. And amongst the sheep, the two different kinds of sheep, one of those sheep who is found will step off the circle. He will see the greener pasture out in the distance. He will see the good shepherd leading to that pasture, and he will walk and follow after that good shepherd. There will be nothing that can take that sheep away from it. To the devil, you are a lost cause. But to the sheep who do not see this, who do not follow the good shepherd, who do not know him, they swing back and forth in this pendulum, and they're terrified to begin with, because these sheep love the things in the world. They think that things in the world are going to protect them, like gold and silver, like vaccinations, like following what the government says, like listening to the news. They think that if they just go along and keep the status quo, that's where their protection is. But what is really happening is the wolves are creating an atmosphere where the sheep are getting fattened for the slaughter. And the sheep will eventually be led into the pen with a bolt going into their head, just like what happens in actual slaughterhouses, because those sheep, in their chase for protection, ran after the wolves who were dressed in sheep's clothing, rather than go after the good shepherd who was over there outside of the circle. The wolves, the very last parts of it, these are the ones that are behind the scenes. Very rarely are the wolves made known to the people. And many wolves are crafty, very difficult to spot, because they appear like sheep in what they do. And you really got to take a little bit of time to see the actions and see the words of these people, to where you can actually determine for yourself the likelihood of whether that is a wolf that has just come out into the open out of necessity. Satan has led him out into the open to bring the sheep back and call them, or whether it's actually a sheep. Very difficult to actually see this. Somebody like Alex Jones, I don't know at this point. I really don't. Don't know whether he's a wolf yet. He comes in sheep's clothing, but there's a lot of different things that are also behind him that could ultimately lead him to bring many people to the slaughter also. He could be a wolf out in plain sight. Very difficult to know that for sure, because Satan is very crafty. Or he could be a sheep. But again, Satan is very crafty. So you do not know this until you see ultimately one thing: the rejection of Christ. And it's not going to be somebody with their tongue that they're going to reject Christ. We're living in the times of the end. It will be a different kind of action. They will take the mark of the beast. Then you will know for certain who is a wolf and who isn't, because all, great and small, rich and poor, will take that mark. Anybody who doesn't ultimately take that ultimate end mark, whatever that actually looks like, then you can be sure that that's a sheep. And when that mark is given out, that is the time for the slaughter. That will be when the wolves and the goats join together and destroy the sheep who are left. But even during those days, which are known to us as the Great Tribulations, 2 witnesses will come along, and 144,000 from amongst the sheep will wake up. They will be given vision, and they will see, and they will lead many also with them. But for the vast majority of sheep, they will be put to death during those times. Somebody who has an outward appearance of a wolf, when you look at him, when you see his pictures, when you see him talk, you can actually see the wolf. Now, he comes in sheep's clothing. He's doing all these good things. This is good, this is good, this is good. But when you really watch what he's doing, for instance, with Kanye, he just said, I wanted to punch him in the face. A sheep would never say that. But he's buying Twitter and doing all these good things. But underneath of him, he's creating microchips for people's brains to take them over. Elon Musk is a wolf. There is no doubt about that. And it took me a little while to be certain of it, but I am certain of it. Who holds the power to call down fire from heaven in full view of the people? Elon. He's got all of his satellites and who knows what else he's actually put up there. Who could potentially be assassinated? Elon. Because what's he saying right now? Well, I'm not going to do public signings anymore. I promise I'm not going to commit suicide. He said that twice. I am not suicidal. He's doing this for a purpose. And God and Satan are showing this to the world for a purpose so that the sheep can get an understanding of who he actually is before he does something. So he's saying basically that they're going to kill me. But what does his brain chip do? Well, it rejoins circuitry. It who knows what it really does, but that's the medical behind it. Somebody that's a stroke victim, for instance, could then be able to have fully operating, functioning brain again. Somebody who suffered a heart attack and just lost functioning in their brain because they didn't receive oxygen for a period of time, it could restore some of that. It could help to restore Parkinson's and multiple sclerosis and these different things, this chip that they're looking to do. But what also could it be? If I'm talking about the vaccines in terms of an infrastructure, why they've needed to put them in 3 billion people is something like I have cell phone towers all around the world. Well, they're in individual humans acting like cell phone towers to bounce signals around. But if I put a chip all in them, then I can really control that person that took that chip. So what if... And he's already come out and said, I will put the chip in me. Elon has said that. I will not give it to somebody else. I will put it in me first. He said it. And I believe that he'll do it. But here's what I see happening with this. Potentially. What if he is assassinated? A fatal head wound. He appears to be dead, yet by his chip, he lives. Or if something happens during the actual implantation of this chip, which looks like he's dead, but then the chip brings him back to life. Watch out for these things, because if they're going to happen, it's going to happen much sooner than you could blink your eye. We're at the very end times. I just got a message on my phone that Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, not really a president, but that's what they call him anyway, he won the Person of the Year award. And it's very interesting, because where is the one place on the earth where World War II Nazis actually still perform the same things that they did in World War II? They still are the same cult. They still perform the same ceremonies. Where does that happen? That happens in Ukraine. Hitler won the Man of the Year in 1938. On September 1st of 1939 came World War II. If you see what God is saying with these things, you can see the picture that, okay, so Hitler won it in 38, World War II happened in 39. Zelensky wins it in 2022, World War III comes in 2023. Because the people change, the name changes, but the spirit behind them is always the same. That's why nothing is new under the sun, with the one exception, the light of the world, Jesus Christ. He was new. Everything else is not. The new birth is new in those of us who have received it, because it didn't come from this world. It's not this world's spirit, which is of its father, the devil. It's of God. Those things are new. The spirit behind Hitler, the spirit behind Zelensky, that's not new. That's as old as it gets. That goes all the way back to Satan. So very interesting that just happened and brought to my attention, as I've been trying to make this video for the last 3 days, but have been interrupted while doing it, and there has to be a purpose for it. Maybe that was the purpose, to see this and then speak to it. But of the wolves, the goats, and the sheep, this is the economy. This is the infrastructure of the entire world. We're all one of those people. Sheep who are blind, sheep who have been found, goats who know what they're doing and doing it anyway because they're seared in the spirit, or wolves who control the goats, who are the alphas of the world. They are like Satan's head people, and they're rarely seen. They stay in the dark. They're hidden away. That's what wolves do. But if they do come forward, they put on sheep's clothing, so the sheep say, look, he's telling me that I'm going to be safe if I just put one of these chips into me. I won't die. I'll live. and the sheep run towards that safety. Because what is an aspect of sheep? Sheep are terrified animals. They want peace and safety. They will follow anything if they can get peace and safety. But the sheep follow blindly into that. The sheep go off into the pits. And amongst the goats, there's different groups of people too. There's pigs, there's vultures, there's different animals you could compare to amongst the goats also, but I'm not even going to get into that because that's more broken down on what does what, which you could probably figure out for yourself. But all of us who live in the flesh, who are donning the fronts of the Spirit in this world, we're living in a time where all of these things I'm speaking of here, you can actually see it. That is why this is an amazing time, the time of the end. It's not an amazing time because of everything that we're going through. It's going to somehow make us tougher, and we're going to build it back better and do it ourselves. And we're going to go off into outer space and roll the galaxy because we've been toughened up. No, God is going to bring the gift to us. We're not going anywhere until God brings it. It's not about becoming tougher. It's about having the knowledge increased, Daniel chapter 12, to go here and there and look at all of these things happen right in front of your eyes and understand the spiritual connection. Whenever the Lord brings sheep to walk in circles for 12 days, he's saying essentially the sheep are like all of the people of the world, and they're going to continue walking in this circle for a year, and then something's going to happen. That's what he's actually saying. And who are the sheep? I've told you who the sheep are, so now you can understand them. Anybody who is talking only in a political form of either right or left and thinking that they're understanding or knowledgeable, they're not. They're just swinging on a pendulum back and forth. They have not seen the reality yet. They're all living in a false reality, whether they say all the things you want to hear or not. The church, who does not understand what is actually happening, they're swinging on a pendulum back and forth. They don't know the reality of the situation that they're in, so they have limited knowledge of what's going on, but they know that they want the safety. They just have never seen themselves to be born again to actually receive it. They've followed all of the goats and the wolves who have misled them with familiar spirits and doctrines of demons over the course of generations. And they still follow that today. And why ultimately do the sheep do this? Because the sheep love the things in the world more than the things of God. The sheep feel more protected by the things in the world like guns and money and gold than they do the things of the Spirit like prayer. The sheep are lost right now. There are very few amongst us walking who truly understand that we're sheep and we see the shepherd. So many of them sheep are being led to their slaughter by wolves who they cannot identify because they have never even identified themselves first. That's why everybody says Israel is going to be saved, all of them who are of the blood of Abraham. They are God's chosen people, not me. I'm just a Gentile. I've just been grafted in. Because they don't understand who they actually are, that they are God's promise. Because they don't know him. He's not their friend. All these people who will say, well, you better call God, by his proper name. The J wasn't invented until 600 AD. As if God doesn't know how to translate and give you what he wants on the earth. These people don't know him. And they try to mislead the sheep to going into the pits with them. Because to them, knowing that somebody is following them, that's at least some form of safety and comfort. Because they cannot stand outside of the circle. They just keep walking in it, going back and forth. This world in Satan's kingdom that he's built, it is the animal farm. And it's time we all begin to understand which one of us we are in this prophecy. God bless.